Off with Eternity's Generals, a book by Dr. Paula Price about apostleship. I unfortunately left my EG book at home, and so I don't have it here to hold up. But we're going to continue in Eternity's Generals and addressing the issue of why apostles are outsiders and why apostles look wrong a lot of the time. So we're in chapter 1 of Eternity's Generals, where she talks about next generation apostleship. So go ahead and share this with your friends. We're going to talk about what she says here in chapter 1, new move, old womb. Why does the new sound so much like the old sometimes? And why does it take forever to be validated? Isn't that what we all want to know? I mean, I don't want to be an apostle because they always sound wrong. You know, I don't want to be that kind of prophet because of whatever. And so a lot of apostles and prophets change their message. They modify it, they tweak it, they try and present it in a way that is the least offensive to those who they want to capture. But unfortunately, it's part of the job to look wrong sometimes before you look right. I want to let you know that this Saturday is Single, Satisfied, and Holy, my very first talk chat about being single, satisfied, and holy. Registration is only $10. If you're in Tulsa, you can come and attend live. If you are online, because you don't live in Tulsa, you can register online because I'm going to be streaming through a webinar software. So it's $10. If you're in Tulsa, we're going to be at a coffee house. You can have all the coffee you can drink. If you're online, you can bring your cup of coffee to the broadcast with you. It's still the same price, okay? And so we're going to be addressing some key issues of being single, satisfied, and holy, starting with statistics, dating statistics, okay, about violence and STDs, because the media paints a fantasy that is not played out in life. We're going to talk about that. How to stay holy, what to do with your sexuality. And I'm not talking about identification and preference. I'm talking about keeping it in the place where it belongs. And if you're not married, what to do with yourself, how to handle yourself, how to keep yourself in check and get delivered, because a lot of people need deliverance. So those are just a few things that we'll address. We're also going to have a live Q&A portion, the last portion of the day, and maybe throughout. I might just take questions throughout the discussion. So you will definitely be involved. Even if you're watching online, you can post your question in the chat feature on the webinar, and I'll be able to answer your questions as well. So I just wanted to make that plug for you. Single, Satisfied, and Holy registration will be closing on Friday if you're here, coming on Saturday, and then Saturday afternoon if you're watching online. All right, so back to the subject at hand about next generation apostleship. This is apostle of the future. Right now, there's all kinds of controversies about apostleship. Can't say that's anything new. We've been in debates for decades about, do we need apostles? We don't need apostles. Well, they were just here to found the church and then they all died off. Who does that though? That's like saying we laid the foundation and once the house was built, we tore it up because the house was here. So we no longer needed it. Wrong, wrong, wrong. You always need your foundation. It has to be maintained. It has to be sometimes replenished, maybe made even. Foundations can settle unevenly. If you have some kind of natural disaster, it can shift the house off of the foundation or shift the foundation itself. And you have some decisions to make. Sometimes you have to tear down the entire building because the foundation is off. And when the foundation is off in a structure, the entire structure is in jeopardy, whether you see it or not. And that's exactly where we are as a church right now. Our foundation is a wreck. The apostles, the prophets, the Psalms, we are a wreck right now because the foundation is not what it should be. Now, I want you to share this broadcast because this is important information. Whether you're an apostle or not, whether you're called to apostleship or not, apostleship affects your Christianity. And that's what you need to understand. It doesn't matter if you sit in the office or not for the purposes of this broadcast. What matters is that each and every Christian is affected by the placement or displacement of apostleship. So apostle of the future, we're dealing with what the church looks like now, how we got here, and then what our future needs to look like. What do we need to do to have a different future? It's easy to sound off on these broadcasts about the problems in the church. It's easy to go clean off about this person doing this and that person doing that. And I'm not talking about doing our job in revealing apostates. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just ranting. Pointless, just mad all over the place. The Word of God says you need to mark those, okay? So when people have defected, when they're apostates, you need to mark them. You need to sound the alarm. You do need to let people know. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just going online and this was wrong with the church. This was wrong with people. And with no solutions. Apostle of the future is about solutions. But before we can get to solution, we have to accurately diagnose the problem. And the problem is not, well, people just kicked prophets out because they didn't like them. Well, nobody wants apostles because it's a warfare office. No. That's not the whole story. How did we even get there? That's not the whole story. So we're here in chapter 1 of Eternity's Generals, talking about next generation apostleship. New move, old womb. We started this last week. We're going to continue with this line of thought. Okay, so there's a statement that she wrote here. She said the necessary events that provoke the new move's changes can span years. So before you, as an apostle or a prophet, say you didn't hear from God because you don't have the immediate harvest, or before you observe somebody and say that can't be God because it didn't happen, you need to understand how things work and move in the kingdom. How things work and move in life. Until it happens, though, what change agents say and do appears to vary little from what the masses are accustomed to over the last several decades. So a new move is coming in the same vein, the same river, the same flow as the old, and will systematically begin to distinguish itself. I know years ago, we've been with Dr. Price for years. I've been with her for 19 years. And years ago, there were people who would take her material, teach it in their own institutions, tell people they're getting the exact same thing that they're getting with Dr. Price. Now, these are people who had larger numbers, they had larger venues, they had the masses, they were on big stages. It was here, it was other states, it was all over the place. At that time, those people looked right because, hey, you have the numbers. You have whatever. If Dr. Price is the one, how come this and how come that? Time goes by. 15, 20 years later, we've grown up. And people see when they look at the product that her mantle firsthand from the source developed and what somebody else's cherry picking of some books did are two completely different things. Apostles fall victim to that a lot. Any pioneer, it doesn't even have to be apostleship. Any pioneer, when Bill Gates was first coming out with Microsoft, it was not welcome. It was a joke. You're like, what? So anything new is often received as a joke. It's often received and dismissed. Oh, please, that's not it. That's nowhere near where the church is going. Nobody wants to, how many times do we hear P.I.T. Norman? Nobody wants to hear that word. That's too hard of a word. It's too strong of a word. You're only called to leaders. You're only called because this word was being birthed in the prosperity heyday. Nobody wants to hear about that when we're rolling in money. And quite honestly, a lot of people weren't rolling in money. But we were preaching and teaching a whole lot of money and prosperity and prosperity and prosperity. So we didn't want to hear about a hard reset in the era of prosperity. But, bless God, as this says, as the decades roll by, times roll by, huge leaders have fallen. The church has lost a lot of credibility because of leaders in ministry. Things have been questioned and jeopardized. Ministries closed down. Properties abandoned. People unemployed. See, the fallout of this is not just, well, I'll find another preacher. Well, I'll find somebody else. You realize that if one major minister goes down, you're talking about jobless people, churchless people, property that goes into receivership. There are a whole lot of things that happen by one person not doing it. So we have to bring this back, not just to say apostles are it. Yay! We're number one because God said we're number one. No, we should be so far past that. into what is the point and purpose of this office. What is our role in making it happen? She says, other than a few dissenting remarks and controversial comments, working and walking out the changes tends to be a ways off. So I'm speaking to you now if you are an apostle, or if you are called to be an apostle, but you're not yet in the office. Because hello, the moment that God tells you you are something is not the moment you step into it. That doesn't happen in any profession. Little kid says, I want to be a doctor. They'll tell you, God told me I'm going to be a doctor. Guess what? You have to finish school. You need to pass with flying colors. You have to take your entrance exams. You need to pass all those levels. You have to make it through graduation. And then you have to go get a job. There's a lot that happens. But in Christendom, as far as our ministry offices and titles go, we bypass all of that. I'm sure that's a huge push, a part of the huge push for don't call me this title and don't call me that title. Because people know that titles mean regulations. They mean standards. So as long as you're just calling me Ashley, we're just cool. We're just chilling. We're just friends. But when we say apostle, that means that you have to come at me a certain way, but I have to conduct my life a certain way. The way I handle things, the way I look at things. So this whole dismissal of titles, I'm telling you, it's not pure motives. There are not pure motives there. A lot of it is, I can take the responsibility off. We can all just be cool. But guess what? Look at where we are. Look at what it's gotten us. So does that approach actually work? No, absolutely not. Those affected find that aside from a different message, usually well blended with the old, and a fluctuating disparity with the norm, sounds from the pulpit or in private discussion surface little to deviate the status quo. Only the Lord's persistence causes that to happen. So that's where we are. Apostles, that's why when you meet a genuine, bona fide apostle, they don't change. And what you love about them is what you can't stand about them. They don't change. We love the people who are consistent. Yes, I can just trust in so-and-so because they're the same. They don't change until you want them to change. And then you're annoyed because they're stubborn and they don't change. So apostles, we are innately built to not be moved by people's whims. It's a part of the genetic mantleship makeup. Oh, this thing is happening over here. That's nice. This thing, I can't tell you how many meetings we've sat in with Dr. Price in all of these years, coming with trending, amazing, new ways of doing things. We have statistical proof. We did the homework, did the research. And she's like, oh, that's nice. We're not doing that. Why not? Sometimes you would be like, why not? Because an apostle recognizes when something, a genuine apostle should recognize when something is trending through versus when it is a new establishment, a new post, a new way of doing things. That's why you need apostles in your life to tell you, they'll say, oh, this is going to phase out. It's going to roll on through. You're like, no. Everybody's doing it. First of all, the more people that are doing it right away, probably the shorter the life it's going to be. An apostle's going to tell you, nope, Dr. Price, there's a devil behind that. God's going to take that. He's already judged that. There's already judgment in the wind on that. I just don't see it. Well, you're not supposed to see it. You don't see it because it's not meant for you to see. But it is happening nonetheless. That is apostleship, a piece of apostleship in action. So whenever you are looking and listening and even verifying your own apostleship, you cannot measure if you're hearing from God or, if you should stick with what you're doing based on initial numbers, initial feedback. We have been hammering this rock to pieces, some of these things, for years. And she was doing it before I met her. I'm talking about 35 years. Now we have hit the oil. Okay? Now we have found the diamonds. Oh! And guess what? They're in raw form. More pressure. Lord Jesus. So if you're called to apostleship, you can't be weak. Not weak in spirit, not weak in emotions, psychologically, because this office is not for the weak. It's not for, I didn't say meek, I said weak. It's not for the feeble of heart, the feeble of mind. How do you know if you're feeble of mind and feeble of heart? Because it doesn't take much of anything to change your mind. There are some prophets that are going to prophesy, boom, boom, boom. And when they're in their mantle, solid as a rock. They step out of that mantleship execution, that moment when they're, let's just say, delivering the word or in prayer, and then this person sways their opinion, and that person, well, they had a good point, and, well, they made sense. And one thing I've learned from our chief apostle, Dr. Paula Price, how many times she says, God told me, versus I was talking to someone else. I don't actually hear her say, I was conferring with flesh in order to conclude what God was saying. Now, that's not to say that you don't have sounding boards. That's not to say that you don't talk through things. But she does not. And then, you take note of your mentors. Not just what they say, but what they do. And not just what they do, but what they don't do. Sometimes you learn a lot by what your mentors are not engaging in, not saying, not thinking, to know where you've deviated, maybe where you've gotten off, where you're not as straight or as strong, or your points of vulnerability. I'm thinking, consult the Lord. Consult the Lord, not flesh. First, consult God. He will tell you who to talk to sometimes. But if you're called to do this kind of job, there are not that many people who are thinking in your vein yet. You usually have to raise them up. Praise him. All this to say that new moves take time to move away from their old lineages. Do you know what that means financially? It might be a while before you start making money on what God has given you. Let's talk finances, okay? Let's talk about that. The big elephant in the room. You got to make a living. But if your message that you have coming out first, or the resources, or the new way of doing things is not well received initially because the old move is still in its heyday, the pendulum is still swinging that way, that means you're going to have to find multiple ways to supplement your income while this old move is moving out. We've had 55 jobs around here to keep this going while we could survive until now, because now is the time for it. Advisements. First of all, even in the world, everything is about mental health, mental health, mental health. When she started talking about this, it was, what? 2005, in the era when she wrote Eternity's Generals. This is when she really started kicking this out. We weren't talking about mental health. It was taboo. You didn't talk about it in the church. You didn't talk about it in the world. You didn't talk about medications. At least one positive byproduct of everybody being on a drug is at least now we're talking about people needing medication. Now we've kind of taken that way out of bounds. So at the time, this was not financially beneficial. In fact, we were counseled out of it because of the financial loss. Well, this isn't where people are. You're not going to get people to come to this. You're not going to get people to come to that. And they weren't exactly wrong. But Dr. Price said, I don't know what else to tell you. If you hear her, she'll say it. This is what God gave me to do. Either I'm going to do it the way he gave it to me, or I'll be done. But I'm not going to change what he told me to make money. And I promise you she could have, and could have made money hand over fist. If she would have stood up in church and prophesied every Sunday, she went through this whole season where God moved on her prophetically like that. Church began to grow, 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 grow. I mean, seats filled wall to wall because people wanted that prophecy. They didn't want the word. They didn't want God's word. They wanted prophecy for their life. And so he had to, he shifted her into apostleship. You want to talk about a hard reset? Like Jesus. He looked up and everybody left. But those called to him. And so we were there. But when you are a genuine apostle, unless he has called you to partner with somebody who is already up there, your journey might look like you've missed God for a long time before you got him. That's why you have to be surrounded by, even if it's a small number of people who know you've heard from God, because God has visited them. See, God visits me about my apostle. It's not just her telling me, it's him telling me. So if you're looking for, I need my tribe, we have all the things. I need my DNA, I need my people. You have to find out who God is talking to about you. Or you'll find out, if you're not an apostle, but you're looking for your apostle, which one is the Lord talking to you about? In visions, in dreams, in prayer. There are things that I'll say to Dr. Price. To me, I'm just talking off the top of my head, and she's like, you were in my prayer closet. That's exactly what the Lord told me. Why is she telling me? So I know when I'm hearing from God and I can note it, but also the Lord confirming his word in somebody else's mouth. who is close and credible. So this is how you can find out, okay, Lord, is this person really you? Because superficially, it may not look like it. We have deemed where God is by numbers. We have concluded that the more numbers somebody has, the more God is with them. The more television appearances they have, the more God is with them. Now, we, on the flip side of that, can list how many people have been on television that have discredited God. We can talk about how many huge ministers and ministries have fallen or are falling or will fall. How many big ministers have been prophesied, y'all not going to last much longer, because he's about to flip this rock over and everything crawling is about to run. That's what's happening. Jesus' parable of the old wineskin, old wine, old garment, and old cloth take hold at this stage. Because new words and often new ways of saying the same old things, are all people here until the Lord forces his change on the church. We don't change unless we don't have a choice. And you know what? We were laughing about that the other day about ourselves, just as people and an institution. If God wants us to move, we got to get squeezed out. We have to run because you're trying to make wise decisions. You know, do I want to incur this cost of this and do that and do that? Especially if you've been in a years of trial and warfare, you're really not trying to buy into more. So he will have to upset that. Claims of fresh new revelations from God initially receive lukewarm receptions because they lack the accompanying power to alter what people come to know and recognize as God in action. As an apostle, if you're an apostle now, apostle of the future, if you know God has called you to the future, I want you to take this to heart, that people don't always do things maliciously. They do things from familiarity, like she says here, from what they come to know and recognize as God in action. They have to see God moving in a new way consistently to register it's God. Otherwise, it's an anomaly. It's a high time. Ooh, how many people say they had a powerful service? An amazing preacher. That's not every week. We have people who come to our church telling us we're in revival. Oh man, you guys are in revival. The worship, the word, this is revival. We're like, this is every Sunday. I want you to know every Sunday. On our worst Sunday, it's still this. When we were at our lowest point, God still got praise. People still, I'm telling you, we would have people come in. This is revival. This is revival. This is apostleship in action, is what it should be. Every apostles' church, God should be raised every time. The Lord must impose his changes on his body, but how does he do it? Dun, dun, dun. By removing or reducing his favor from his old messages and messengers and their words to sound hollow and repetitive or non-appealing. We have a Come Home campaign in Tulsa. Come home to the congregation of the mighty. Come home to Tulsa. Come, C-O-M-E-E. Congregation of the Mighty Ecclesial Embassy is the full name of our church. So we were playing off, Dr. Price, okay? I mean, seriously, in a chair one day. It's like, come home to Tulsa. We started talking about this thing before we were rebooting the church. So come is C-O-M-E-E. Congregation of the Mighty Ecclesial Embassy, home to Tulsa. Come home. So you're going to hear us talking about, you need to come home. You need to come home. People are coming home. And we're having our next wave move in this next couple of months. Why? Because we're all saying the same thing, but it just is so repetitive. The old move, I'm just not getting anything. I'm not being fed in my church anymore. I mean, I love my pastor. I love my apostle. Even if you're under an apostle, it might be an old move apostle. Every apostle is not the new move. I'm just going to blink on that. All right. And so it's just tinny, it's just hollow. It's not the same anymore. I mean, when I first went, I was like, wow. And now when I go, and we'd have people, even in our previous church experience, I just sat in my car in the parking lot praying that God wouldn't make me go in the church. I mean, it can get that bad. And so we have a whole come home to Tulsa. Why? Because God is flipping off the lights in the old move, turning down the impact, dialing down their reach. How many ministers now do you see, these old ones from this whole old move, begging for money, coming off of television, cutting their broadcast, downsizing their ministries, because that move is a wrap? And sometimes it's not about if somebody did something wrong. It's just time for the next thing that God is doing. Why is he turning down the volume on the evangelical charismatic paradigm and turning up apostleship and the prophetic. I'll tell you why. Because devils are in high places, and apostles and prophets are equipped to take on and take out devils. They weren't casting out devils until Jesus walked the planet. Okay? Do you hear me? These things were not happening. He was the first apostle. He's letting us know they were not doing those things. So he has to shift, and Dr. Price has taught this. I think it's in this book. Oh, it might be in the other one. You know, start blending books after a while, where she says that apostles are martial. It's a martial office, meaning we are combative. So if you're called to this office, get over it. Get over your problems with being combative, having to take on resistance, having to take on opposition. It's the job. And if you embrace it, God gives you the power to execute it. The more you fight what God is giving you, the more unresolved you are, the less consistent you are in your results, the less strength you have. I have friends in the military, and you know what? The ones who absolutely love it rise to the top. They get the most challenging assignments. They take them on purpose. I don't know if I'm there yet. All right. They take them on purpose to find their limits. I want to see if I can do it. I know it's nearly going to kill me, but I just want to see if I can do it. Okay. But that's how we need to be as apostles. Lord, what do we need to take out for you today? That needs to be our question. What dark power, what dark force, what high place, what devil sitting in government? There are apostles right now, God is telling, go back to school to get your degree in government. Go back so you can run for office. No, we want to hide in prayer. We want to play it safe like an intercessor. This is not an intercessor's job. This is a warfare job. They pray, yes, we praying, okay? We sit in high places and we pray. But the place of execution for us is not just in the prayer closet. Dr. Price can pray all day long, but she has to get out there, get on the broadcast, write the books, set up the institutions, hire the people, do what we need to do to confront the darkness. This June, we have our Tulsa Prophetic Training Institute, where we are confronting pagan prophets. I want you to go to her website, www.drpaulaaprice.com, and click on events. If you are an apostle, I want you at this event. November is the near summit, but prophets and apostles must come together in order to make this work. We need apostles. Actually, a lot of apostles come to Tulsa Prophetic Training Institute, which is great. And I tell you what, it anchors that event in a whole different way. But I want you to come in June to Tulsa, to the Tulsa Prophetic Training Institute. I'm going to be there, not just because it's my job, but because it is a strategic session where we are going to learn how to disrupt this darkness, confronting pagan prophets, witches, warlocks. We don't know how to guard the kingdom. And that's what we're going to learn there. All right, you can go to my website, www.drashley.com as well. If you want to sow a seed, if you want to see what's going on in my world of ministry, if you want to register for Single, Satisfied, and Holy for Tulsa or the webinar, you can do that there. And guess what? I'm also a life advisor. So if your life is in need of advisement, it's not free, all right? But it is worth every penny. I promise you, every person we have is a satisfied customer at PPM Global Resources, our Paula Price Success Center. So if you want to learn more about me becoming your personal one-on-one advisor to teach you, it doesn't even matter what you need to know or learn. We can walk through life's issues. Look at my site to find out how to connect even to our Success Center site. It's a hub. It'll take you wherever you need to go to find out the services that I offer, and even take the services on a test run. If you're like, I don't know, I just want to do 2 30-minute sessions. It's called a starter package. You can start. Let's get started, okay? So let's see, tomorrow is Thursday, the Paula Price Show at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. Tonight is Wednesday Warriors with Chief Prophet Paula Price, where we are going to be in Before the Garden, another book written by Dr. Paula Price. We're learning about king and kingdom. Perfect connection.